What did we talk about last week? Who died? Lazarus died. He's dead. Like your phone battery when you don't plug it in. He's dead. He's dead. Tonight we are going to have some fun because Jesus is going to perform a resurrection, and that is awesome. So we can be very excited about that. Tonight's title is long, but it kind of rhymes. I wanted to use Shun's. A resurrection and a murderous circumspection. Whoa. So I wanted to use a big word because I know Rob would appreciate it. No problem, Rob. It's like several syllables and everything. Kylie could tell us how many if she was here, but she's not. A murderous circumspection. Anybody? Definition? It's not that bad. Use your brain. Think for a second. It is when you circumspect. Yeah, it's a real word. It's a legitimate word. It's like premeditation. All right. It's to contemplate beforehand, to plan, prepare. Right. There you go. That's your vocab word for the day. You should be happy, especially Rob. All right. We're going to be in John 11 tonight, so you can take your time getting there, turning, flipping. We are going to read. I've been thinking about it. We're going to read 26 verses. We should stand for it. Awesome. All right. Everybody stand up. Do it. Do it. We haven't read them out loud in a while. I'll start reading with you. You'll follow along on the screen as it displays. It will display. Just give it a second. Sometimes we're faster than technology. All right. Picking it up in verse 28. So let's all start this. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here and is calling your name."
The man who had died came out, his hands being bound with linen strips, his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews therefore that had come with Mary and had seen what he did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? This man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe it. And how does the come and take away both our place and our nation? For one of them, Caiaphas, was the high priest, said to them,
Nice job. You did a good job. You can sit down now. I know you're feeling a little faint. You're like, wow, that was a lot of verses. Oh my goodness, quick. Is the room spinning? Lack of oxygen? You did good. That was good. All right. You read the whole thing. Nobody dropped. We got some things to talk about though in there. I think you can see that there's a lot. It's really the close of the story. So last week we started the story with Lazarus. We had Jesus interacting with people, the disciples, their unbelief, not understanding what Jesus was going to do. He lost a friend, right? Jesus is sad. He is very sad that he lost his friend. Almost as disconcerting to him, though, is the fact that people seem to not understand how powerful he is and what he intends to do, what he has come to do, which is die and resurrect. And he's alluded to, he's made mention of, he has spoken this so often, and yet people seem to still not understand who Jesus is, what he can do, right? So there's a lot of things for Jesus in this situation you have to understand, right? Because again, Jesus is not he's not Clark Kent, right? Like it's not just a suit with glasses, right? But really even Clark Kent, like even if Clark Kent gets shot with a bullet, right? He's still Superman, so Clark Kent doesn't die. Like he can wear the suit, he's still Superman. Jesus is not God in a human suit, right? It's not just some sort of outer vesture he puts on to disguise his holiness and his glory, right? He is fully man and fully God. So you have to remember, fully connected with human emotion at this time when he is deeply saddened, when he gets angry, right? He's going to weep tonight. We're going to see him weep. When he is doing these human emotions, they are not simply for our own good. They are also his connection very, very personally, intimately to humanity, because he is human and he is God completely at the same time. So we don't want to lose Jesus, particularly tonight, in the words he's going to say and the emotion he's going to display, because it's real. It's not a disguise. It's not just for your own benefit. It's real. It's real emotion. It's his real humanity. All right. Just so you understand, we're looking at Jesus. You have to see him in context tonight. When we start out tonight, the first point is that Jesus is deeply moved, and it's a phrase used twice in the first 10 verses, and it's an interesting phrase, and that's why I want you to see it. And this really brings out some of his emotion. In verse 28, we start, when she had said this, she went away and called Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep. Now, just pause. Got to remember last week. Wait, it is last week. Yes. Remember last week, Martha goes out, talks to Jesus, right? But Mary stays back. And when she stays back because the mourners were there, right? The slightly odd, creepy people didn't really even know Lazarus, but had come to mourn, and as was the practice, to make sure that you mourned with those that mourned, that in the Jewish custom there were people that just mourned, right? When people were sad and lost someone, they mourned. So Mary stays back with the mourners. There's a lot of mourners. You don't want to, like, again, I don't know. Personally, I felt like I wouldn't want to leave a bunch of strangers in my home. So like she stays back with the dozens of mourners that are there to mourn with her, and now she's going to go. Martha returns. Mary's going to go to talk with Jesus, and all the mourners are like, well, got to mourn with her. So they're mourning with her. They're literally going with her as they mourn. And when you understand when they're going mourning, they're like wailing and crying, and they're loud. And it's kind of very obvious that they're mourning, specifically so everyone can know that there's been a loss, and they should mourn with Mary and Martha. All right. So it's kind of a weird. It's like the opposite of a parade. It's like a sad parade, kind of going out to meet Jesus simply because Mary's going to go out and now talk with Jesus. All right, good. I want to make sure you don't lose connection with the mourners there, because it makes this whole thing a lot weirder. Verse 32. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And we heard those exact words from Martha last week, and it's a common understanding that they knew Jesus' power to heal, but what they slightly miss is Jesus' imminent power over death currently, his ability to literally resurrect people. And when Jesus saw her weeping, right, he sees her weeping now, and she's overcome with the emotion that had Jesus just been there, had he been there, he could have healed him and this would have never happened, right? And yet she loves Jesus and Jesus loves her, and she's glad that he's here. It's comforting. Because he's not just a mourner, he's personally connected with her. They have deep connection. When he sees her weeping and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. Deeply moved and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, and again, there's our phrase, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave and a stone lay against it. This phrase, deeply moved, is connected to intense emotion, right? And you have to understand, when he's saying these, this is not some sort of holy terminology. This is a connection to humanity. He is deeply moved in his humanity over the loss, the sadness it's caused. And really, commentators will say that there's three things that he is deeply moved over. He's deeply moved, right, because he lost a friend. He lost a friend. A friend has died. A close personal friend. You too, right? We can understand that. If you've experienced loss, you're deeply moved. It's moving. If you've seen someone else experience loss and you've cared for them, it's deeply moving. We're deeply moved, especially around loss. And there's another reason that he's deeply moved, and you can understand this too, right? He is so sad at the evil power of death, right? The last enemy, as Paul calls it in 1 Corinthians 15, that death that he has come to conquer, right? He has come to conquer sin and death so that it has no more power. He is sad, and he's deeply moved at this, the evil of death. He's also sad for the people that are there, right? He is sad that they have to hurt personally, but I think that there's something else we miss. And if you look back, even at John 10, which we covered, I'll read that, and then I'll give you another story from Mark that puts this phrase in a different light. So if we go to John 10, we pick it up in 37, you'll hear like this idea of what just recently happened with Jesus, particularly Jesus connecting to people and what he had done. Remember, here he is communicating to the religious leaders who are trying to hold him accountable at the temple, right? They're trying to catch him again, to arrest him, to kill him. And he is pleading with them so they might understand. And he says, let me pick it up, verse 30, I'm going to find it. "If I am not doing the works of my Father, then do not believe me. But if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and understand that the Father is in me and I am in the Father." Right, again, they sought to arrest him. And even last week, if you pick it up in John 11, verse 12, the disciples said to him, "Lord, Lazarus has fallen asleep." No, I just jumped a line. The disciple said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover." Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought they meant he was simply taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus told them, right, plainly, "Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." And I think you see a connection to Jesus really wanting people to understand, and it actually it's frustrating. I think Jesus gets frustrated that he is continually, obviously, in front of them, holy, powerful, righteous, healing, doing miracles from the Father. They're not getting it. So if you go to Mark 1, which you're welcome to go to, but you don't have to, because I will read it. But if you go to Mark 1, you kind of get it in context. I'm going to put it in context to this little story in Mark 1. I'm going to pick it up in verse 40. It's not going to be up on the screen, so if you actually do want to read it personally, you have to go to the passage. Mark 1, verse 40 says this, "And a leper came to him," this is a leper coming to Jesus, "imploring him, and kneeling, said to him, if you will, can you make me clean? Moved with, if you will, you can make me clean," which shows faith. Mark is all about faith and its connection to healing. Mark's an awesome gospel. It's my favorite because it's kind of like the ADD gospel. It's like bam, 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 bam. One thing happens. Jesus is here. Jesus is here. Jesus is here. It's my favorite gospel. I like it. So verse 41, moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I will be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. And Jesus, and here's the phrase again that we just read. And Jesus sternly charged him and sent him away at once, and said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded for a proof to them. He heals the man that has leprosy, right? He heals the leper, and he sternly charges them. That's that he is moved with stern words. It's very clear, right? And you can see it. It's like a child and a parent, right? Like, don't do this again, right? You get this when, like, the parent gets down on one knee and you get in the face and you're like, I want you to understand. And then the instructions come. That's kind of the idea here. And there's a couple other times in the Gospels where the same phrase is sternly charged or even scolded. There's emotion there that you can connect with this idea that Jesus is deeply moved in John 11. And I think it's because, and we've seen it even in the story of Lazarus, people don't believe like they should in Jesus. And I think it's telling really for us, what don't we believe about Jesus? Where do we limit Jesus? Where do you and I limit Jesus? We limit Jesus. Amen. I feel like I limit Jesus often. I don't really fully grasp how powerful and how awesome he is. Right? There are times when I'll sing a worship song and I connect with the words and I realize the moving nature of a song and how clearly it can depict maybe the overwhelming grace, right? Or the emotions that should be invoked by the love that God shows us. And I'm moved, but then I'll go to work on Monday, and that movement of Christ and how big he is over my circumstances suddenly becomes very, very small, right? Like he's not able to give me more work. He's not able to fix a copy machine. He's not able to help me speak kindly to my coworkers. He's not able to work through me to minister to my boss. In fact, I'm going to segregate that whole area of my life, right? Because he's Jesus and he's God and he's so big and powerful and strong, but he doesn't really apply here. He doesn't fit here. And we limit God. And I think part of the fact that Jesus is deeply moved over sin, the evil of death, he's deeply moved that he has lost his friend. He's deeply moved that people have experienced loss. I think he's also deeply moved and a little frustrated. If you had just been there, how many times did I say it to him? If you'd just been there, he would have been fine. Lazarus would have made it. You could have healed him. Jesus is like, I told you. I told you. Lazarus is just sleeping. I told you that what happened to Lazarus would bring the glory of God, and it was for God's glory, that the Son of Man would be glorified. Do you think this is really the end? Like, do you think this is it? This is the glory that I was talking about? He's deeply moved that it's this constant not getting it. One thing's really for sure. By the end of the story of Lazarus, people really start to get it. Those that follow him really begin the process of getting it. And I've always told you it's an interesting study to go through all the Gospels, whether it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and just look at the disciples and really pick up when are the disciples actual believers of Christ? When do they actually believe Jesus is Messiah, God, come to bring salvation, that he is going to die, he's going to resurrect, conquer sin and death, and they believe that. And it's interesting, while their words have oftentimes said they believe, but when you get to Lazarus, something starts to switch in the disciples, and they will begin to get it. Now, not even until Jesus' crucifixion do they truly understand it, and the resurrection do they absolutely believe it. But it starts here. And if you remember, we looked at this as really the pivot point of John, the idea of Lazarus, because what Jesus is walking to, the triumphant win over sin and death, is the resurrection. And so this begins, really, we are almost a week away from his death in the book of John in context. And he begins this time with a resurrection. And you don't miss that, because that is super key. He's coming to the last week of his life, and you know how it starts? It starts with death losing. Now it's just a man's physical death, but it's foreshadowing that he is walking us all to the conquering resurrection. It's awesome. It's so amazing when you unfold the Gospels, how Jesus' ministry, it's not happenstance. It's absolutely perfectly lined up, right? And that's why you constantly see him running back to, I do the will of my Father, and everything I do is the works of the Father. The Father has given me these works to do, and I do them. And God is perfectly planned as Jesus works and Jesus moves. It's perfect the way it lines up. So, all right. Jesus is deeply moved. And I think not only is he saddened, he's just frustrated. And you've gotten to that point where frustration is so exasperating that it actually brings you to tears. Right? And maybe it's for a person that you love and care about that maybe they struggle with something. Maybe it's a physical struggle. Maybe it's a spiritual struggle. Right? And you so want them to maybe understand who God is personally so that they can come to know Christ as Savior and Lord. In so many years you've prayed and talked and communicated and seem to get nowhere, and that frustration, it's almost an anger, but it's an anger at the fact that they just can't get it, and you're so saddened by it and frustrated by that it brings you to tears. That's mixed in with the emotions when it says Jesus wept. He just wishes they could believe. So then what happens? Then we get to the point of the story where Jesus is going to make sure it's very clear that he has power over death. So anybody in here ever resurrected anybody? All right, so take some notes. Jesus is going to skip that. I don't want to hear it. Not medical resuscitation. I'm talking resurrection. The last time you went down to the morgue in your hospital and pulled somebody out 4 days cold. All right, good. Picking up in verse 38, as we're going to have a resurrection, verse 39. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha has a very enlightened comment. Martha, the sister of the dead man, right? Lazarus' sister, said to Jesus, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days." And Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" Deeply moved. So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." And it's super important when Jesus would say something like that, because he doesn't need to say it, right? So the next phrase is very clear, helps us clear that up. "I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of those people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." When he said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." And this is a freaky part of the story. All right. Like we have, like if you watch Scooby-Doo, you've more than likely caught an episode with a mummy in it, more than likely. Like this is a real mummy story, like a real one, where a mummy actually walks around. Not like, and it's not like Scrappy-Doo's not like in the background, like, "Let me at him," right? It's like a real mummy, right? That's scary. Scrappy-Doo, you guys wait, like Scooby-Doo, Scrappy-Doo, Shaggy, you guys remember, right? Okay. It's terrible. Really at him. Scrappy, he's always wanted to fight, but they always like kept him back because he's like really tiny. Anyway, it's a real mummy story. And I think it's really appropriate, the practicality that Martha displays and the fact that it's been 4 days. Remember last week we talked about the fact that there was now at this time, right? And even continued on after this, a what you would call back then a more modern Jewish belief that the soul would linger on earth for 3 days trying to re-enter the body. Specifically, Jesus waits 4 days, very interestingly, so that more in their times, that modern idea would be dispelled anyway, right? Like, oh, you say even 3 days? It's 4 days now. The soul is completely gone. There's no way in your own mind that it could re-enter his body. The soul is gone. It's in heaven now. And Jesus heals the man on the 4th day, and Martha's like, "Jesus, it's been 4 days, and I don't know if you've experienced a lot of loss, but it's probably not pleasant in the tomb." It's not pleasant, right? I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but it would have been, yeah. Martha's pretty accurate. There would have been an odor. And she's like, "I don't think it's a good idea. The reason we keep these things sealed up is with good reason, Jesus, because there's a body decomposing inside." That's why we roll a stone in front. And Jesus is like, you didn't get it, right? I told you that there would be glory in this. In the first 5 verses of this story, he gives them the fact that this is for the glory, right? That the Son of God would be made glorified, that God would show his glory through Lazarus's illness and now death. We haven't seen it yet, right? We looked last week. Perhaps Martha has a view to a glory of resurrection in the end times, right? We read that Martha, I know that even on the last day you can resurrect the dead. And Jesus is like, I don't plan on waiting for the glory. There's glory in this right now. Roll the stone away. This is going to involve a couple of people because, again, remember, they want it to be sealed. So it's not like they just, right? One of two ways. There could have been usually one large stone. They liked one big stone. Kind of made it clear. They could have actually stacked up a lot of, relatively large stones, but they sealed this. So it's not like oh, let's just, hey, Timmy, go ahead and move the stone so we can see what happens. It's like everybody's like getting there's 3 guys and they're like working really hard to open the tomb. And when they open the tomb, Jesus' prayer of thankfulness to God that he has heard them for the sake of them to know that God works through his son to glorify his son. And he says, Lazarus, come out. And then we have the mummy scenario, right? When a body died, what was Jewish practice would be to wrap them in linen cloth and to use preserving spices, right? To decrease the possible odor, right? Even outside the door, and to help the body as it decayed to stay whole, to kind of stay together, right? So like an arm wouldn't decompose and fall off on the ground and oh, is that too much? Just so that the body would be tight together, right? So Lazarus is really in a scenario kind of like this. Like he may have had his hands, but his legs were tight together. Everything was tight, so he didn't lose anything. It makes sense. So when Lazarus comes out of the tomb, it was quite probably like a waddle. He's waddling like a penguin to come out of the tomb. No, I'm gonna do it. But he didn't have range of motion, but he's alive and he's wrapped under a lot of cloth. And Jesus kindly has his first words be like, probably should untie him, right? And in this moment, what these people have seen is a man who died, right? Who they wrapped a dead body. And I don't want to bring back memories because a lot of us have suffered loss. But when a body is dead, there's no life to it. It just looks, it's empty. It's just flesh and bone. It's not alive. And we know it and we see it. It's clear. And they wrapped a dead body. They put a dead body in a tomb. They had a ceremony. They had a funeral. The body was dead and it's been laying there. For 4 days, the body's been laying there in a tomb. And these people have now witnessed the body they saw and touched and moved that was completely dead, walking alive, ready to interact, ready to rejoin the living, literally. How cool is that? Is that cool? That's pretty freaking awesome. None of us have experienced this. None of us have actually experienced a funeral followed by the dead person alive again. No one has followed. We haven't. No one has sat through a funeral of a person they've cared about and seen them come back to life. And these people have experienced it. It's like Charles Dickens. He was as dead as a doornail, and now he is alive. And as Dickens would say, he doesn't know why a doornail. It's not particularly a dead metal. But anyway, he was as dead as he could be, and he's alive now. Jesus has power over death. He has power to resurrect. And it's not just healing. And it's not just in the end. He has power over death right now. Right now. When we close the story, we come to that second part of the title. What's going to happen is, as has happened often, when Jesus does a sign, a wonder, it usually causes people to believe. And I think particularly in this one, it's a very interesting connection. It's a very real, fervent kind of belief. In verse 45, many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. And in this verse, in these two verses, before we get too far, I want you to understand not everybody believes in Jesus. We're about to have what's called the triumphal entry, where Jesus enters into Jerusalem during Passover, and it's going to look like everybody believes in him. It's not true, okay? Probably didn't even have a majority, but he had a lot, not even a majority. But people are believing in him. And the people that believe in this have seen this sign. The belief in Jesus is deep, right? And you have to understand, if you had seen someone do this, your belief in them would be very deep. Someone that you know personally was dead for 4 days and they are alive now. You would have a very strong belief, particularly if they connected everything they did to the God you worshipped. It's a very strong belief. But some of them still went to the Pharisees, and here's where it gets a little like crazy, a little hinky. So the chief priests and Pharisees gather the council. All right. So this is the council that would literally sit like in Jerusalem. They're going to make some ideas and plans. Now we don't have a good idea if this is actually the full council. I say that because, again, the trial that Jesus is going to have is a debacle of a trial. Not everybody's there. Not everybody's supposed to be passing rule, passing judgment over someone is at that trial. So I don't know if everybody's at this council, because there were leaders who had serious questions about who Jesus really was, and there were leaders that really hated Jesus for what he was taking from them. But they gather the council, right? This would be people that lead the church, not the church, people that lead in Jerusalem, right, from the temple. What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And it's a bit of like an overstatement, right? If he keeps going, everyone will believe in him. And the Romans will come, and what will they do? They will take away both our place and our nation. The Jews had a very special setup inside of the Roman rule. The Romans let them keep their God, right? They were able to worship Yahweh. In many ways, they have their own court system. You'll see this as it plays out. Jesus has two trials. They let them keep their own court system, that they pass their own rule and law over Jewish matters in the Jewish court. They have their own Jewish guards at the Jewish temple that they can send out in like a large group, almost like a little, kind of like the Vatican, but like they have their own police force almost. And that's, and inside of this Roman rule is this little center of Jewish culture. Unlike the other conquered peoples, right? They don't have to be Jewish citizens. They can be just Jewish, right? Without Roman citizenship. It's weird. And they're concerned, right, that they're going to take our place in our nation, that the idea that they still had the promised land. They were there, that they still worshiped in the temple. God's holy building was still sacred, that the Romans would come. They would take their freedom, right? Now, when we say that, like, I think we as Americans can get on board with that. We really don't like it when people start threatening our freedom, right? I know. Don't threaten my freedom, right? Insert the Tea Party or whatever else. Don't take my freedom, right? No taxation without representation, right? We get upset about that. And they're going to take their land. They're going to take the temple. So you can see this is a big deal for them. They're very concerned that if Jesus keeps going like this and everyone starts believing him, and in this, I don't think they're just tying this to Jewish people, everyone, right? Because the Romans don't really care if all the Jews believe in Jesus, but if all of a sudden Romans start believing in Jesus, who's going to lose power? Right? And who's in charge of the Romans? Really called him sort of a C, but it makes the S sound. Yeah, salad dressing. Caesar, right? And he rules the Romans, and he's going to become upset because now somebody else is gaining power in the Roman kingdom, and then they're going to, kill Jesus and crush the Jews and end it all. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest, appropriately named, said to them, "You know nothing at all." It's kind of a sarcastic comment in the Hebrew there. You can't quite read it well, right? You know nothing. Right, it's a little sarcasm. You don't know. What are you, idiots? Nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish. He did not say this on his own accord. Now, whose accord do you think he said this on? Whose plan is this? Is this Caiaphas' plan? No. Is this Caiaphas' prophecy? No. John kind of gives us some dialogue as the story is unfolding here. He puts in, if you will, a short explanation to help us understand what Caiaphas has just said. He did not say this on his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. Now, his words there about Jesus dying, right? They're not just they're not his prophecy. This is not Caiaphas prophesying Jesus would die. This is the prophecy fulfilled that Jesus would die. It's not Caiaphas' prophecy, it's God's prophecy. And this is where John added that for us to understand, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. Therefore, Jesus no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went there to the region near the wilderness, to a town called Ephraim, and there he stayed with his disciples. It looks like Caiaphas has this big plan to kill Jesus to save his nation, and what John says is yes, those words are a prophecy that will be fulfilled, because Jesus will save your nation, not just your nation, all the nations. And at this point, this isn't just them talking about what we do about the Jesus problem. This is them saying, we're going to kill Jesus, right? This is premeditated murder. And if you don't believe me, understand that this is going to extend not just to Jesus, but like after next week, they're going to want to kill Lazarus too. Like they're going to want to put him to death, because Lazarus is proof that Jesus has power over death. And it's really awkward when you want to discourage them believing in someone and kill someone, when the product of his resurrective power walks around. You can go meet him, right? You can go to Bethany and talk with a guy who was once dead that Jesus resurrected. They want to murder Jesus. And they think that by murdering Jesus, it will save their nation. Right? It's better one man should die than a whole nation die. Caiaphas thinks he's going to protect his nation. What he doesn't realize is by doing that, Jesus is going to save his nation. Not everybody. It's not a blanket statement. Salvation, though, comes through Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. Him setting the plan in motion to murder Jesus is absolutely true. He will save the nation and all the nations. And he starts this last week with a resurrection. And we can't lose that Jesus deeply moved. He hates the power of sin and death, and he so wants people to get it. He hates that people are hurt by death, that experience loss, and when you've experienced loss, understand Jesus understands, and he more some sort of faraway God. He's also imminently close God, right next to you, lost. He wants to love and care for you, and he is not happy with loss. He's not happy with suffering. It actually deeply moves him. And that people don't get it. They've seen him do these things. They want him to get it. This ministry will catapult what will happen in the triumphal entry. He will gain fame from this miracle that he has done with Lazarus. Because it is a powerful miracle when you can conquer death. And yet this one doesn't even touch the one that will come. Because unlike this, Jesus resurrected someone else. He's going to resurrect himself. If someone thinks they have power to resurrect someone else, let them show they have power to resurrect themselves. That is the gap for which no one could overcome. No amount of Satan's parlor tricks overcomes that one. For if Satan were sentenced to once terminable death, he would not be able to resurrect himself. That power belongs to a holy and righteous God only. So this resurrection simply foreshadows, it's just rough language, the English language, simply foreshadows the one that is to come. So that's how we're going to close tonight. But what I thought might be helpful, and what we've been doing, is ending with ending with a word from an epistle that kind of ties into the story of the gospel. So we're going to go to Colossians tonight. Nathan's going to come up and play. Worship team, hang out, listen, digest. We're going to be in respond time now. Worship team's going to hang out. They're going to listen to. Nathan's going to play. I want you to hear the words of Colossians that we're going to read. We're going to be in Colossians 1. And as you hear the words, digest them. We're going to read them slowly. We're going to talk about them a little bit. But what do we do? What does it mean for us that Jesus has power over death, power over sin and death to resurrect? And what I want us to see here in Colossians is what Paul can show us to help us know how do we respond in respond time? Because I hear that Jesus has power over death. I'm very excited. What does that mean for me? What do I do with it? What do I do with the knowledge of who Jesus is and what he has power over? And then how does that translate to me? Do I have power? What power do I have, and how do I do the ministry that I'm called to? We talked about the ministry of reconciliation last week, that we are called to reconcile, that God has gifted us the ministry of reconciliation. He uses us to bring about reconciliation in the world for his glory. But at times, I don't know if you feel like me, like I can't do it. I don't have the energy. I don't have the ability. I don't have the resources. I just can't. I'm limited. I limit Jesus. I myself feel just broken and limited at times. So what am I to do? Colossians chapter 1. We're going to start in verse 15. It says it's just got to listen to it. Understand. Remember, we're tying this back to Jesus' power of resurrection. And this is talking about the Christ. It says this: he is the image of the invisible God. He is the firstborn of all creation, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. And that is that he is higher than anything set up on earth, and everything set up on earth is set up by him. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, even the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead. He might be preeminent in everything. He might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. And you, literally you and me, you, who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he is now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. If indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister. Jump down with me. We're going to go to understand Paul, right? And what does this mean for us? How do we connect this beautiful picture of who Christ is, and that we who were nothing, who were haters of God, have been reconciled to God instead. Now, instead of being haters of God, we've been reconciled to be worshipers of God, holy and blameless, which none of us are. Paul says in verse 28, him we proclaim, warning everyone and teaching everyone with all wisdom, that we may present everyone mature in Christ. And here's really good news in one short verse for you when you have felt tired and broken and not knowing what to do when you minister God, when you minister Christ, when you're part of that reconciliation, what to do in those situations. This is Paul. For this and he is struggling with all his energy that he powerfully works within me. Paul wants us to understand something. That ministry of reconciliation we talked about last week, the resurrection Jesus gives from the dead. We read even last week that we have been created a new creature, that we have been brought from death to life. And what do? We no longer work inside of our construct of strength. Right? We no longer are bound and limited to the power I have. We're going to struggle. Paul struggles. But what he says is, when I struggle against this earth, I struggle with his energy. It's not Paul's energy he's struggling with. He's struggling with Christ's energy. He doesn't struggle with his power. He struggles against the world with Christ's power. And here's the realization. It's not something you have to, if you are in relationship with God, if you're one of his children, if you have like a sheep have heard his voice and you come to him because he's your shepherd. If Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, you have access fully to his energy and power. This isn't some sort of one of those weird, like, I'm not going to give you some sort of special water or if you make a donation, right? You have it. And it's not Scooby-Doo power. It's real. It's real, legitimate power. When you can't do it, it's the best place. When you're struggling, Paul struggled. It's the best place to be because I struggle and I'm broken. This is good news. That Jesus will give us access to his energy and power so that when you need to speak to someone that you know needs Christ, when you're in a situation that can be redeemed initially, right? What you eat, watch, work, how you interact with people, when you go to Wawa, when you order McDonald's, whatever it is, wherever you go, all those situations that seem to be just for you can be for Jesus. And it's not that you have to magically do them yourselves because you can't. You have access to Christ, his energy, his power through the Spirit. So I wanted to encourage you tonight as we respond. I wanted you to be encouraged. I wanted you to be able to thank God tonight. And at the same time, remember to request that energy and power to meet your need when you're broken and struggling. Those situations you know that you should be Jesus, but you're just not. In fact, you're so much not, you don't care anymore. They're God's, they're Jesus's. He resurrected Lazarus in front of people that then believe in him. He literally takes a dead person and makes him alive again, and he will resurrect himself. That energy power. Not self-help. It's God help. It's Christ wanting to help you and empower you. Reckons hurting, broken world around you. No. You've been gifted the ministry. And you can do it through the power of Christ. So spend some time, thankful time in prayer to God, who has given you this energy and power to be able to reconcile the ministry of reconciliation he has gifted you to do as well. Let's thank him for that and see where we can be appropriately applying Christ's energy and power in our lives.